اجلاس پارلمانی در لندن. فراخوان نمایندگان مجلسین عوام و اعیان انگلستان به آزادی 7 گروگان اشرفی، تامین امنیت لیبرتی، لزوم یک تحقیقات مستقل بین المللی. چرچ هاوس، 28 اکتبر 2013، 6 آبان 1392. 57 روز از اعتصاب غذا گذشت. حمایت اجلاس پارلمانی از خواستهای اعتصاب کنندگان، اعلام همبستگی جوامع ایرانیان در کارزار جهانی برای آزادی گروگانهای اشرفی. اعضای برجسته مجلس اعیان، بارونس بوتروید، رئیس و سخنگوی مجلس عوام انگلستان 1992 2000، تونی کلارک، رئیس پیشین حزب کارگر انگلستان، لورد کارلایل، حقوقدان برجسته انگلستان دارای رتبه مشاورت ملکه، لورد مگینس و بارونس اولون. نمایندگان مجلس عوام، دیوید ایمس، برایان بینلی، استیو مکیب و متیو اوفورد و طاهر بومدرا، مسئول پرونده اشرف در سازمان ملل.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Can I suggest now that we all stand for a few moments and give our standing ovation to the martyrs as a mark of respect. Thank you very much indeed. First of all, can I pay my and I know everybody else's tribute to the hunger strikers? We know that they're striking for a very important issue and they deserve our enormous respect. Thank you very much. Hugh Robertson has written a fairly detailed letter compared with what we've seen in the past to John Randall MP, who has been of great assistance. In it, Mr. Robertson says that the government is deeply concerned by the appalling violence and loss of life following the attack on Camp Liberty. And he says that the government has called on the Iraqi government to cooperate fully with the United Nations to do everything necessary to ensure the safety of residents. In my view, the UK government really needs to wake up to the evidence evidence which has been accepted not only by the Washington Post, but by governments around the world. And, you know, our main focus must be to try and persuade the UK government, and particularly the Foreign Office, to act urgently to get the freedom of the hostages and to ensure that Camp Liberty residents not only live in security, but they live in civilised security. There are residents of Camp Liberty who are not even able to obtain basic medical treatment at the present time, and obviously that is unacceptable. It's actually not optional for the British and the United States and other governments to ensure the safety and well-being of Camp Liberty residents, because it is a treaty obligation under the 4th Geneva Convention. I think on the issues of Camp Ashraf and Camp Liberty, the United Nations has been doing no more than play what has turned out to be a very small and inadequate part in a bit of sacred drama. And the problem is that whatever the United Nations has done hasn't made the position of a single person in those camps better at all. Indeed, there have been times when United Nations officials have appeared to be appeasing, and I use that word advisedly and reluctantly, appeasing the government of Iraq. On this issue, at least, the government of Iraq is looking like a client state of the present regime in Iran. I think that has to be stated clearly and as often as possible. I would like to think that any British journalists here today would try and persuade their editors to give much greater attention in the British press and in the other British media to what has happened to members of the PMOI, NCRI in Iraq. When I was in the United States lobbying on behalf of the NCRI a couple of years ago, it is almost exactly a couple of years ago now, I asked very, very senior United States State Department officials, including the chief lawyer at the State Department, what was their evidence then for being so difficult about the NCRI? And they said that their evidence was covered by state security. When I challenged them that they had no evidence whatsoever of terrorist action after, at the latest, 2001, and that the British proscribed organisation, Appeals Commission and Court of Appeal judgments demonstrated that there had been no such action since 2001, they could offer nothing to the contrary. However, and I pay tribute to a moment when I saw Lord McGuinness, who's here, lose his temper in the Foreign Office one morning, it is extremely frustrating, and I understood why Ken lost his temper, because the British government still seems to stick to the canard that there has been terrorism action by the PMOI since 2001. I believe that this meeting is part of a process. Unfortunately, it's a part of a long process, but it's a process worth sustaining. What are we aiming to achieve? We're not here for the purpose of a meeting at which we all gather together and propose the same unanimous motion, useful though that is. We are here to play our part in bringing Iran back into the family of nations. And what, in my view, as a lawyer, Iran needs and deserves more than anything, the rule of law. And so we welcome the statement of Madam Rajavi, which I hope will now work.
Distinguished parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to have the opportunity to talk to you once again. Allow me first to express my deep gratitude to all of you, distinguished members of both Houses of Parliament, for your relentless efforts in support of the Iranian people in their strive for freedom and democracy. I would like in particular thank Lord Carlisle, Baroness Boothroyd, Baroness Olom, Lord Waddington, Lord Macness, Lord Clark, Lord Alton, Lord Delakia, Brian Binley, Mark Williams, Matthew Afford, David Ames, Steve McCabe, Joe Benton, Alan Neal, John Leach, David Vaughan, Lady Corbett, and Mr. Boumedra for your defense of the Ashrafis as the vanguard and source of inspiration for the Iranian people to overthrow the criminal regime and establish democracy in Iran. I would like to very briefly address two issues of importance relating to the current developments in Iran. Almost 2 months after the massacre on 1st of September, the international community has yet failed to hold the government of Iraq accountable for this crime against humanity. 7 hostages remain captive and at risk of being transferred to the religious fascism ruling Iran. The British government, along with the UN, US, and other governments, have condemned the massacre, but they avoid identifying and condemning the Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki and its masters in Iran. They know all the facts. They have been provided all the details about the attack, including the names of Iraqi commanders on the scene. But they pretend as if they have no evidence on the direct role of the government of Iraq in this crime. They have 2 reasons and 1 excuse. The reasons are economic ties with Iraq and efforts to appease the religious fascism in Iran, which is indeed the ultimate ruler in Iraq. Since these 2 reasons are so disgraceful, one excuse that they claim in private was that Maliki is so vulnerable that we should not exert more pressure on him. This approach is a prelude for another catastrophe. The US and the United Kingdom and some other European countries, by refusing to hold Maliki accountable and lack of a firm approach against the Iraqi government to release hostages, are effectively encouraging Maliki to continue with suppression and killing. I want to warn about the vulnerable security situation in Liberty. Mullahs have explicitly said that Liberty would be next after Ashraf. I appeal to the British people, the Houses of Parliament and the UK government to take action to prevent another human tragedy. It is time for the Western governments to stand up to the dictator of New Iraq, which they have created, and stop military and trade support to the Iraqi government until the hostages are released and international guarantees for protection of Camp Liberty residents is secured. The British government must answer this question. Why is it refusing to accept sick and wounded residents from Liberty, even those who have already been recognized as refugees by Britain? Honorable members of Parliament, the massacre at Ashraf by the Iraqi forces at the behest of the religious fascism ruling Iran, before anything, is the reflection of the clerical regime's fear of the resistance. Economical crisis, intensifying internal power struggle, and along with growing popular discontent has made the regime more vulnerable and more fearful for its survival. Therefore, they resort to any crime to eliminate the democratic alternative to their regime. Under domestic pressure and international sanction, the regime has also resorted to a show of moderation, hoping once again to create this illusion in the West that perhaps there must be a possibility that the regime might change its behavior. This is a mirror, but with grave consequences for the Iranian people and global peace and security. On the nuclear issue, despite massive propaganda in the West, the negotiator said after return to Iran that we made no commitment there. None of the country's red lines are ever subject to negotiations. He further said the Iranian negotiating team strongly emphasized the country's absolute rights and added that the nuclear team felt obliged to protect them. At the same time, Rouhani, the regime's president, said diplomatic movement of the government prompted governments around the world to praise democracy in Iran and halt the trend of sanctions against Iran. On nuclear issue, I must caution that there are certain clear benchmarks to be observed by the regime. Otherwise, it has no other intention but deception in order to remove sanctions. They must abide by the Security Council resolutions and stop the enrichment completely, sign additional protocol, and allow undeclared inspection of all declared and undeclared sites. Anything short of this is giving into religious fascism. It is called appeasement and nothing else. I wish to underscore we cannot accept to let the policy of appeasement to lead us to, as Winston Churchill said, to war and shame. I urge this Parliament not to allow history be repeated. I have even more important warnings to make. The issue of Iran is not limited only to nuclear. There are two other greater issues and systematic violation of human rights and deadly meddling of the regime in the region, particularly in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, and destruction of Iranian people's wealth for its regional warmongering. Over the past few months, the number of executions in Iran have stepped up. More than 250 have been executed since last June. Is this the moderation that based on which UK government is eager to engage and improve relations with the regime? It is time for the government to wake up to realities and support the Iranian people in their struggle for regime change and establish of freedom and democracy. Thank you all. Thank you all.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Our chairman really, in his open remarks, I thought said it all. But I'm here this evening because I wish to add my voice to those who have condemned the massacre of Iranian dissidents in Camp Ashraf last month. The footing that emerged, that we saw some of it from the camp, was horrendous when 52 human beings, men and women, were shot at point-blank range. massacred in broad daylight. It was a murder. And their murder took place whilst they were under surveillance and protection of Iraq and UN army, who were supposedly monitoring them all. I think it was an outrageous act, and it cannot pass without condemnation. But I have to refer to the inertia and the contemplating of what to do by our government, the UK government, by the United States, and by the United Nations, because their inertia is unacceptable. The murdered residents were all protected persons under the Fourth Geneva Convention, and they were persons of concern under international law. In addition, ladies and gentlemen, the United States government has signed an agreement with each and every one of the residents to ensure their protection and their rights. And my friends, you know, in protest at this atrocity, there are people on hunger strike here in London, and it has been a great privilege for me to shake hands with some of them here this evening, and likewise in cities in many other parts of the world, including in Camp Liberty itself. Well, as we can condemn it all and we know it all, we also need a solution to this situation. Otherwise, we'll be faced with more human suffering as the hunger strikers, and time passes and they're near their 60th day of strike. And I don't pretend that there are any simple solutions, but we must go on working with the Foreign Office. But you know, whilst we have expressions of concern like that, and we're pleased to have them, why should not Prime Minister Cameron and Foreign Secretary Haig also take some initiatives? Why shouldn't they not place a call to Prime Minister Maliki in Baghdad and demand the release of the 7 hostages? My friends, let there be no doubt at all that Prime Minister Maliki is enjoying power in Iraq because thousands of coalition forces, hundreds of them who were British nationals, died to make that possible. And any protest by the Iraqi government that they do not know where the hostages are being held is, I believe, untrue and an insult to our intelligence. Should the 7 Ashraf hostages not be released immediately, we need very seriously to reconsider our diplomatic relations, our political and our economic relationship with the government of Iraq. Calls need to be placed to the Secretary General of the United Nations. But why don't we appeal now to the United Nations for a 24-hour monitoring team? And for those people that I've come to know, the blue helmets of the United Nations peacekeepers to be deployed in Camp Liberty without delay. You know, Iraq has proved itself to be not only incapable of providing protection. The Iraqi regime has been responsible for the massacre of people they were in fact entrusted to protect. This vile act is a scandal. It is a blight on the international community. Thank you.
But can I say, it's a pleasure to be here again with friends who fight for such a just cause. We all know that we have a medieval theocracy running Iran. Can I say, like you, I am here to voice my condemnation in the strongest possible terms of the Iraqi Prime Minister who sent a SWAT team on a killing spree to Camp Ashraf on the 1st of September. And this is a man who wouldn't be in the position he's in had it not been for the Western coalition forces That is the great tragedy of all of this. It's a disgrace. But it's an even greater disgrace to recognise that 52 men and women were massacred and 7 were taken hostage. And that is why David Cameron, Barack Obama, the leaders of European countries have a responsibility not only to condemn, but to ensure, as the great ex-Speaker of the House of Commons said, to make the point in whatever way is possible. And that's what the leaders of Western countries ought to be doing at this very moment. Forget the finessing with diplomacy. Forget all of that. Break through those barriers and tell al-Maliki that our young people made sacrifices for him and he repays us with evil doing, and that simply is unacceptable. So condemnation is vitally important, but we have other pressing priorities. We must do everything in our power to ensure that the US and UK governments bring the necessary pressure to bear on the Iraqi government to release the 7 hostages and allow the items of freedom into Camp Liberty that are necessary for the protection of Liberty residents. And we do not have much time. I don't need to tell you that there are many in Camp Liberty, as well as in the UK, Canada, Australia and elsewhere, who have now been on a hunger strike for 58 days. I commend their great courage. So, let us say what we need to say to al-Maliki. Let us say what we need to say to the government in Tehran. Let us make sure that the US particularly knows of our concerns. They have so far cruelly betrayed the people of Iraq, Ashraf and Liberty. The residents of Camp Ashraf kept their part of the bargain, and they paid with their blood. They died with cards in their pockets, issued to them affirming their protected person status under the 4th Geneva Convention. Well, if it doesn't matter, what's the sense of the rule of law? What's the sense of the United Nations? What's the sense of sending people to Iraq to create freedom for that country when they pay so little heed to the very basis of freedom? And we must remember what Madam Maryam Rajavi said in her 10-point action plan. And when I talk about fighting, I don't mean fighting with weapons. I mean fighting with ideas, fighting with argument, fighting with debate, fighting in support of the rule of law, fighting for people who need our help desperately. Those people in Ashraf and Liberty. So, we stand with you. Your fight is our fight. The fight of these good people on hunger strike is our fight. And we commit ourselves to pursuing that fight. And I repeat, may the Almighty give us victory.
Well, good evening. It's an enormous privilege to be here with you today. You know, the first time I saw the footage of the attack on Camp Ashraf, I was terrified. As I watched it this time, one of the things that struck me was that those men, that Iraqi SWAT team, who was strolling round the camp, they feared no response. They knew that there was no threat to them. They knew that they could murder at will. and it was terrible to see. They knew too that the people they were killing were, as Lord Carlisle and others have said, they were protected persons, persons of concern under the law. And I think every right-thinking person must absolutely condemn everything that happened there in Camp Ashraf that day, but it's not enough just to condemn. I think of the 7 residents of Camp Ashraf who were taken hostage and who are currently being held against their will, I think, in Baghdad. I have appealed previously publicly for the release of these people. 6 of them are women, and I understand that the governments of Iraq and the United States know where they're being held. Their ongoing detention is clearly in breach of the rule of law and of all the international obligations of Iraq. There is a very urgent need to publicise yet again the threat to these 7 people and to secure their release. And I ask myself, why did they kill 52 and take 7 hostage? What was their purpose in taking the 7 hostages, and why were 6 of them women? I wrote to the Minister of State at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office about this on the 10th of September, and he replied to me. And he told me that the government has repeatedly raised the issue with the Prime Minister's office in Iraq, with the ambassador in London, and at the UN. The Minister expressed concern about the fate of the hostages. I do not think concern is enough. The Iraqi government is under an international law duty to release these 7 people and to return them to their families immediately. And I think there must be a full investigation of what happened at Camp Ashraf that day. Now, President Obama will meet Mr. al-Maliki at the White House on Friday, November the 1st. That's this Friday. It is to be expected that President Obama will use the opportunity of his meeting with Mr. al-Maliki to articulate absolute condemnation of what happened on the 1st of September and to call for the immediate release of the hostages. But what else can the United Nations and the United States do? The massacre was a clear violation of the quadripartite agreement, which was signed by the Iraqi government and ratified by the United States and the United Nations on August the 17th, 2012. And the failure to implement those repeated commitments to protect the Iranians in Iraq actually invites further violence on the Iranians in Iraq. And I know that you're acutely aware of that. You know, ladies and gentlemen, 3,000 people is not a lot of people to protect. The combined efforts of the United States and the United Nations should be capable of delivering protection to those people. And it should not have been possible for the 100 residents in Camp Ashraf to have been subjected to that terrible attack. I call on Secretary of State William Hague now to call for UN protection for the Iranians currently living in Iraq and to demand publicly the immediate release of the 7 hostages.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, despite the fact that I am slightly under the weather, I wouldn't have wanted or dared to miss this meeting here this evening. We are meeting on an important mission. It is very important, not least because I look here and I see representatives of those who are putting their own lives at risk in order to highlight the injustice that has occurred in Camp Ashraf and in Camp Liberty. And I can do nothing better than say that the words of previous speakers, including the chairman and Betty Boothroyd and others, I echo those word for word. Particularly, and you've heard me say this before, particularly the responsibility of my Parliament and the responsibility of the British press. Where are you? Where are you? Last week I had the opportunity with others to go to put the case in Brussels. Taha was there with me and others. And it was there that I had the privilege to sit beside Vice President Hashimi, a representative of the Iraqi people who has been banished on threat of his life from his own country. And why my government cannot see, cannot understand, and cannot articulate the injustice of that, I'm at a loss to know. I'm more at a loss to know. Some of you will know that each day I correspond with the Foreign Office. I don't give them a day to forget. We had a minister called Alistair Burt, who at least is a communicator and was willing to listen, was willing to discuss. And what has happened to Alistair Burt? I was astonished to find that he's got the heave-ho. He's no longer a minister in the Foreign Office. Thank you, Alistair Burt. We have to, and each and every one of us has to, say to the press, get your finger out. Why is this highlighted on Newsnight and all the other political programs that we see day in and day out? We've got to have an answer to that. Those who are on hunger strike have my sympathy, have my support. I hope that all our prayers and all our hopes for what is being demonstrated by these courageous ladies here and others will make some impact on our government. I hope that they'll give a sign in terms of what they'll do to achieve the release of the 7 hostages. It would be a shame on the British nation, on the Americans, and as you said, Mr. Chairman, on the United Nations, if we lost one more person. So pray with me for their success. I thank them for their determination. We're with you. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope, I pray for your success in achieving the freedom for the people of Camp Ashraf and Camp Liberty and the people of Iran overall. God bless you.
Mr. Chairman, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I thank each and every one of you for being here today. And I so admire these good people who are on their 58th day of hunger strike, risking their own health in an effort to save the lives of others. By others, of course, I'm referring to the 7 hostages taken by the Iraqi forces in the barbaric attack on Camp Ashraf on the 1st of September of this year. I want to focus my brief comments on our government and start by welcoming the words of condemnation and condolences that have come from the Foreign Office. However, words are not enough. Our government, ladies and gentlemen, must immediately take concrete steps to ensure the release of the 7 hostages and guarantee the security of those in liberty and thereby prevent any further loss of life to the hunger strikers. Ladies and gentlemen, let us not forget that the United Kingdom bears a huge legal and moral responsibility for the fate of all the residents of liberty and of the 7 hostages. After all, it was the United Kingdom and the United States of America who led the coalition that took military action in Iraq. The United Kingdom and the United States of America guaranteed the residents of Camp Ashraf's protection under international law. They recognised the residents of Camp Ashraf as protected persons under the 4th Geneva Convention. Yet, ladies and gentlemen, the United Kingdom has done very little to deliver on its responsibilities. No steps have been taken to secure the release of the 7 hostages. No steps have been taken to pressurise the Iraqi government to allow basic equipment to enter liberty for the protection of its residents. Instead, the United Kingdom has indeed expanded relations with Iraq. Our demands are basic, and therefore they are demands we expect the government and our Foreign Secretary to meet. The British government must take all necessary steps, including through all international organs and the international community, to guarantee the release of the 7 hostages, including 6 women. Then the British government must work with our international partners to urgently ensure that the Iraqi government provides the protection requirements at liberty, including double-layered roofs for the trailers, returning all the T-walls and concrete bunkers, and ensuring the rights of hunger strikers are respected. In liberty in particular, they are being denied access to medical treatment. So, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I want to finish off by saying a few words about the current state of the Iranian regime and the British government's relations with it. I am embarrassed by the fact that there is talk of the restoration of diplomatic relations between Britain and Iran in circumstances where the regime has not yet even apologised for attacking our embassy and assaulted embassy staff. The government must not turn a blind eye to the atrocious breaches of human rights that continue to take place in Iran and the fact that the regime continues to be the most active state sponsor of terrorism. Instead, ladies and gentlemen, we must continue to adopt a firm stance with Iran and send the regime a strong message. First, this is the message to the regime. Put a stop to all human rights abuses and the suppression of the Iranian people. Secondly, comply with all United Nations Security Council resolutions in respect of your nuclear program. Third, put a stop to your support for terrorism and stop your interference in the international affairs of Iraq and Syria. If you fail, the international community will continue to isolate you and will redouble its efforts to apply wide-ranging sanctions, thereby creating the circumstances for the Iranian people and their democratic resistance to topple the regime. We will never, never do that. We will keep on in our pursuit for justice and mercy, and we will stand shoulder to shoulder with you in this campaign.
Good evening. It's very nice to be here with so many people tonight. Think what the family and friends of the 7 members who are missing at the moment must be going through. And as Lord McGuinness said, astonishingly, the British media has barely reported on it at all. We know they were seized on the 1st of September, while supposedly under the protection of the United Nations. People who handed over weapons which they could have used to protect themselves, but in good faith handed them over in return for guarantees from Western countries and the United Nations. We need the hostages back, and we need the guilty brought to book. It wasn't to establish a puppet regime to do the mullah's bidding. The UN and the Western governments need to act now. We need it made clear to Malachi that it's his job to secure the hostages' release. And as Baroness Alone has said, we need an internationally supervised investigation into the events at Ashraf on September the 1st. I don't think it's too late to save these hostages if our government acts now.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to be here. Both Steve and indeed David have said that other people have said what we all feel. There's something that we feel right now. Do you feel it? I feel frustrated that over 100 residents have been killed in the most brutal and barbaric way. And I feel frustrated on the most previous occasions people had their hands tied and they're shot in the back of their head. 52 men and women executed with a card in their pocket with their name on and also identifying their status under international law as a protected person under the 4th. I'm frustrated that UNAMI does not do its job, that the Americans don't keep their promises, and that card did not save those people. It's frustrating that that massacre on the 1st of September was preventable. We all know that it's futile to ask a perpetrator of a crime to invest that very same crime. So Iraq must have nothing to do with the investigation into the massacre. Instead, I've previously and again called for an independent international investigative team to embark on a fact-finding mission and to report to the international community their findings. It is irrefutable that 7 hostages were abducted from Camp Ashraf on the 1st of September. We must honour the 52 people who were murdered that day by ensuring that the 7 hostages are released immediately. The government of Iraq cannot and will not be allowed to act with impunity. They must release the 7 hostages now. No more excuses. The UN must put blue helmets on the ground at Camp Liberty, and the US must honour their obligations to the residents of Camp Liberty by sending a monitoring team there as a matter of urgency. The security of the residents of the camp must be guaranteed. We are making these demands and we accept nothing less. Several weeks ago I spoke at the rally in Trafalgar Square on this very issue, and I met the hunger strikers from my constituency and from the Iranian community across North London. It saddens me that after 58 days your hunger strike continues. But I want to say how much I salute you for the actions that you're taking and what you're trying to do. I commend you for your resolve and how much I admire your discipline and your determination. So I say together we can bring about change in Iran, and under Mrs. Rajavi's leadership I know Iran can and will be free. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Dr. Matthew said he's frustrated. I wonder what am I going to say, being the person who followed this file and being responsible of this file for more than 3 years at UNAMI. I have written a paper which I hope the organizers will circulate it, because I put in it all the details, documented details. But I would like now just to address few points that were raised by diplomats, by politicians who are following this file. And I would like you to know the details about what happened and how it happened, and then you will draw your own conclusions. First, on the attack itself of the 1st of September. On the 2nd of September, Prime Minister al-Maliki said his government doesn't know about it. And let me tell you that it's absolutely impossible for anybody to reach Camp Ashraf without being detected by the Iraqi security forces. The Camp Ashraf, is surrounded by 2 security rings. The outer ring is the rapid deployment forces, which are based at the east and west of the camp. A brigade of the mechanized infantry based in the ex-FOB Grizzly in the north of Ashraf. And the inner ring, security ring, is a police battalion based inside Ashraf. In addition to this, the camp is surrounded by watchtowers all around the camp. And I know the assailant where they went in, and I know the road very well because I used to take it every week. This is a lie. Now, about the 7 abducted people. Again, the Iraqi government is saying we don't know what they are, who kidnapped them. And let me tell you, because I already have previous experience with this abduction issue, and I followed people, all kind of people who were abducted and disappeared in Iraq, and it was my job to follow them and find out their whereabouts. The reason why it's easy for the government to sort of throw away the responsibility is because the dysfunctional system, the Iraqi dysfunctional system made this that every institution has its own detention facilities. So you have the Ministry of Interior, which runs its own detention facilities. The Minister of Defense with its own facilities. Minister of Justice, the Minister of Labor and Social Affairs. And the most dangerous is the Prime Minister's office, who runs his own detention facilities. But let me tell you, the 7 are detained in the Prime Minister's facilities, where they are removable. These are realities, and I hope that those who are raising questions like the United Nations, the spokesperson of the Office of the High Commissioner for Refugees, said if indeed they were abducted, So from this podium, I'm here to tell him, yes, they are indeed abducted, and if he dispatches a commission to look where they are, they will find them in the Prime Minister's detention facilities. I want to move to another issue, which is very dear to me. The allegations that are reported, including in the Commonwealth and the Foreign and Commonwealth Office report on human rights. They express concern that there are some violations of human rights inside the camp, impliedly pointing towards the Ashrafis themselves. And it's really shocking to me to hear this kind of allegations because, first of all, the office of the Prime Minister, his political and security advisors, openly and it's on record, said we will make the Ashrafis' life unbearable. We will not let them settle a minute, and we will deprive them of their basic necessities so they will leave Iraq. This is on record, and to my surprise, no diplomatic mission ever reports this kind of official statements. They accuse, or they claim, that Ashrafis are not cooperating with the United Nations and they are obstructing the process of refugee status determination of the UNHCR. Let me explain to you very briefly what are the steps for you to determine who is obstructing the process. First of all, the United Nations requested that they need to transfer the population to a safe and secure and neutral place. And therefore they have to relocate the population to Liberty. And you all know that Liberty turned out to be not safe, not secure, not neutral. Yet the Ashrafis complied with this request. They moved. Now, at the arrival to Liberty, they are supposed to go through what is called the refugee status determination process. What is it? At the arrival, they are identified and they are conciliated. So, conciliation, registration, identification and registration, then interviews, and then the last step is for the UNHCR to adjudicate the cases, individual cases. The Ashrafis were asked to go through the process. They did. They all sent individual application for as asylum seekers to seek refugee status. All of them did. Now, they all went to Liberty. They all went through the conciliation and identification process. And 2,000 of them were interviewed. And then suddenly the process stopped. Why? It stopped at the stage of adjudication. It's not the Ashrafis who adjudicate their cases. It's the UNHCR. So at this stage, the process is halting. Can we blame the Ashrafis for that? So it's this process. When we understand the process, we know who is obstructing it. It's not the Ashrafis, it's the United Nations itself. But why? Those who are familiar with the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding signed between the United Nations and the government of Iraq on 25th of December 2011. The Clause 7 gives the right to the Iraqi government not to recognize the outcome of the refugee status determination process done by the UNHCR. Now the UNHCR is very embarrassed because they cannot grant refugee status and then confront the government of Iraq, which is not going to recognize the outcome. So the UNHCR is slow in the process. They're halting the process till the settlement countries will offer places, like they did, like Albania did. The minute there are places for resettlement, the UNHCR will adjudicate the case. Can we blame the Ashrafis for this delay? 2,000 people were interviewed for more than a year now, and they are still waiting to be adjudicated. Can we blame the Ashrafis for that? So, the responsibilities are clear. But, you know, I'm not a diplomat, and I really tell the truth. I can't hide it. It's on record. Whenever we met at UNAMI with diplomats, we discussed the options available to the Ashrafis. And they are usually the traditional UNHCR solutions for refugees, which are option 1, return home. Option 2, regularize the situation in the host country. Option 3, third countries will offer settlements. The British ambassador has been always taking the lead in advocating option 1, meaning go home. This is on record. This is always the first suggestion by the British ambassador, saying that the real viable solution is option 1. And the whole process of transferring them from Ashraf to Liberty is absolutely to make sure that the bond between the Ashrafis is destroyed and that people will individually say, enough is enough, I'm going home. That is the plan. And I'm really amazed how diplomats manage to cover these realities and make reports to blame everything on the Ashrafis. I am saying what I'm saying because I live this on the ground and I was extremely frustrated. And indeed, I was reached the point of I can't bear it anymore. I resigned for that. But when I resigned, I vowed not to keep silent, even though the United Nations Just to finish with this, I tell you that I received a letter officially from the United Nations in New York telling me to keep quiet.
But once again, friends, it's a great pleasure and a privilege to be attending an NCRI-sponsored conference where we get the chance to look at the current situation in Iran and we can make comment on it. Earlier this year, the sham presidential election produced a ruthless enemy of the forces seeking freedom and democracy in Iran. You will recall the great confidence trick that the mullahs pulled on gullible nations and leaders in many parts of the world, describing Rouhani as a moderate. That description was a gross misrepresentation and distortion of the truth. Let's have a look at the man. A man who was the regime's chief negotiator in the talks on nuclear ambitions, on the regime's nuclear ambitions. His 30-year pedigree includes his involvement in the intelligence, military and national security branches of the inhumane and evil regime. What sort of a moderate who sanctions death and torture since assuming the presidency is he? What sort of a moderate, as somebody said just a few minutes ago, he'd be better described as a butcher. We have a duty, friends, and a responsibility to expose the mythology surrounding this evil man. What can we do? Here in the United Kingdom, we must seek to let our government know that since assuming power, Rouhani has presided over 250 executions, including at least 13 women. This appalling statistic has to be seen together with what has happened since the beginning of this year, 2013, where the number of executions now totals almost 500. 500 human lives put to death. For what? For wanting what we take for granted? What sort of a man, what sort of a regime, what sort of a world have we got that there's silence, the wall of silence is there? Other speakers have mentioned it. Why don't we read in today's papers the execution that took place yesterday? Why don't we learn about the children who were taken from their homes and executed? I don't know. As the Chairman has said, for 30 years I've been trying to find out the answers. Yes, friends, it goes on. The gouging, amputations, executions, it's going on. And still we get this wall of silence. We're going to see ministers just how deaf they are and how blind they are to the evidence that's presented to them. So colleagues, we've got to demand freedom for the hostages. It's our duty to shout out loud, let those people get back to their families and their friends. There is so much to demand. The people at that so-called concentration camp called Liberty, they've had removed all the protective clothing they had, things that would give them safety in that place, taken away from them. What sort of people are they that they can do that? Why don't we have a United Nations group of people going in there and looking after and seeing that these people are not abused as we know they are? The European Parliament apparently recently adopted a resolution saying that Iraq's government carried out the massacre at Ashraf. Did you read that in the paper? Did you read anything that somebody at that stature, that level of politics and international activity should say that? That the US Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Robert Mendes, said recently that all US arms sales to Iraq will be suspended until the hostages are released. Good luck to him. We've had 150 members of the European Parliament, including 6 vice presidents, signing a statement in support of Liberty residents. We've got to stress on Mrs Rajavi's 5-point plan. We've got to tell the world that she's always given, in recent years, the third way, an option. She's exposed the folly of appeasement. She's called on the world time and time again. We applaud your people and we pray for the day when Iran will be free. Thank you.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, can I invite Azeda Zabetti to join us? She's a wonderful solicitor. We will have representatives of 15 Anglo-Iranian communities and societies join us.
Thank you, Chairman. On behalf of all of the sponsors of this evening's programme, I would just like to take this opportunity to thank all of your colleagues, David, for all of your endeavours and all of your support. The sponsors of this evening's programme are representatives of many branches of associations across the UK. I'm going to take the opportunity to read out all of the sponsors and then ask one or two speakers to come onto the stage to address you. The sponsors of this evening's programme were the Committee of Anglo-Iranian Lawyers, the Anglo-Iranian Youth Society, the Iranian Association of Assam, the Iranian Teachers Committee, the Union of Anglo-Iranian Religious Minorities, the Association of Iranian Women in the UK, the Anglo-Iranian Business Association, the National Association of Iranian Academics in Britain, the Iranian Dental Association, the Phoenix Association for the Revival of Iranian Arts in Britain, the Anglo-Iranian Community in Greater London, the Association of Iranian Professionals in Glasgow, the Association of Iranian Professionals in Suffolk, the Iranian Women's Association, the Anglo-Iranian Association of Middlesbrough, the Iranian Community in Greater Manchester, the Iranian Community in Newcastle upon Tyne, the Anglo-Iranian Community in South Yorkshire, the Association of Iranian Political Prisoners in the United Kingdom, the Iranian Trade Association, the Anglo-Iranian Women Youth Association, the Iranian Community in South UK, the Iranian Community in Oxford, the Iranian Community in Sheffield, the Anglo-Iranian Association of Family Members of the Residents of Camps Ashraf and Liberty, and the Iranian Medical Association.
Thank you, Azadeh. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I just wanted to say a few words, if I may, about the strength of feeling that exists within Iranian communities, not only here in the UK, but around the world, about what's been happening to our brothers and sisters in Camp Ashraf, and the responsibility for the crimes that have been committed against our relatives, our loved ones, and those who we believe represent the beacon of hope for a future Iran. But we do have huge expectations of the US, the UK and the UN. They've let us down to date, but we will hold them responsible. And I think on behalf of everyone that's here, the message that I want to send to the US, to the UK, to our Foreign Office, to the State Department, to the United Nations, to all the officials who have been involved in this file case for the last few years, that those who support the people of Ashraf, those who support the people of Camp Liberty, many, many tens of thousands around the world, parliamentarians, lawyers, all sorts of other people, we will not rest until such time as all of you, for so long as you keep continuing along the path that you have, the irresponsible path that has led to the death of our relatives, to hold you responsible in any court of law, in any jurisdiction, or any other place where the rule of law and or justice is delivered, to hold you personally responsible for your lies, for your betrayal, for your breaches of international treaties and international obligations and agreements that you have entered into directly with the residents of Camp Ashraf and Camp Liberty. That our blood has been and continues to boil. And I think that the monarchy, of course, will be dealt with in due course in whatever criminal court exists. But I don't think that the UK, the US and our officials should be under any illusion that they won't bear some responsibility for what has gone on, because they've had a direct role to play in this, and they have had, certainly, and continue to have, the ability to resolve all of these issues very quickly if the will was there. So I repeat the demands of everyone here, including the release of our 7 hostages, and again, take this opportunity to thank you all for being here, thank you all for your effort. We will not fail to deliver on our promises and the commitment that we have made, all of us, to the residents of Camp Liberty, that we will do everything in our power and provide them with every possible resource to ensure that their rights under international law and the promises that have been made to them are delivered on. Thank you so much.
با سلام دوستان و حامیان مقاومت ایران، به همه شما درود می‌فرستیم و از تلاش‌های شما در این پیکار آزادی قدردانی می‌کنیم. با درود به 52 شهید سرفراز اشرف که در جنایتی دیگر به دستور ولی فقیه رژیم آخوندی و به دست مزدور او مالکی جنایتکار خون پاکشان در اشرف بر زمین ریخته شد و با ایستادگی قهرمانانه خود ماهیت پلید رژیم آخوندی را افشا و تسلیم ناپذیری مجاهدین سرفراز را مهر کردند و با درود به 7 گروگان اشرفی که با پایداری بر مواضعشان و اعتصاب غذای قهرمانانه خود توطئه رژیم آخوندی را برای به زانو درآوردن مجاهدان آزادی و ندامت و توبه را با شکست کامل مواجهه ساختند. ما هواداران مجاهدین با این قهرمانان سرافراز لیبرتی عهد و پیمان می‌بندیم که تا سرنگونی رژیم آخوندی و برقراری صلح و آزادی از پا ننشینیم. ما جامعه ایرانیان مقیم انگلستان از دولت انگلیس، آمریکا و سازمان ملل درخواست می‌کنیم: 1. برای آزادی 7 گروگان فوراً اقدام کنید. 2. سلامت و امنیت مجاهدین لیبرتی را با استقرار کلاه آبیای ملل متحد در لیبرتی تضمین کنید. 3. درهای زندان لیبرتی را باز کنید و به خبرنگاران و وکلا اجازه بدهید از لیبرتی بازدید کنند تا واقعیت حمله به اشرف در معرض قضاوت و وجدانهای بیدار قرار گیرد. 4. با تحقیقات شفاف و مستقل نقش مالکی و رژیم آخوندی را افشا کنید. خون شهیدان ما، رنگ اسیران ما در تو گره میخورد رجوی قهرمان. خون شهیدان ما، رنگ اسیران ما در تو گره میخورد رجوی قهرمان.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, with your permission, I would like to ask all the hunger strikers to come to the stage. As you all know, on 1st of September this year, a terrible massacre happened in Camp Ashraf. A massacre that was instructed by tyrants of Tehran, sanctioned by terrorist Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki, facilitated by Iraqi army, performed by Maliki's elite or dirty forces. As a result, as you all know, 52 bravest of the brave men and women were murdered and 7 more were taken hostages. So the question remains, where were the US and UN observers who promised 24/7 monitoring of Ashraf and Liberty at the time that this crime has happened? Where are they now? What are they going to do about it, about the 7 hostages? Why the US administration is keeping silence about the whole affair and is asking criminals to investigate their own massacre? We have decided to go on hunger strike until all our demands are met. Chiefly, the freedom of 7 Ashrafis hostages, a stationing of UN monitors blue helmets, troops 24/7 to guarantee safety and well-being of our defenseless sisters and brothers in Camp Liberty. We have decided that we go on right to the end. As I said before, if it means that in this process we lose our life or damage our health, so be it. The mullahs regime and their narrow-minded allies in the West only understand the language of determination and firmness. So we have firmly decided to go right to the end without a shadow of doubt, whatever the consequence. We strongly believe that despite the deadly silence by the media and the inactiveness of UK, US, EU and UN,
the truth will prevail and the perpetrators will face justice. We also firmly believe that in the near future Iran will be freed and prosperous with Maryam Rajavi's leadership. I thank you.
It's absolutely, I am so moved by all the incredible speeches that we've heard today. It really is something terrible that now the United States and the UK as party to it are cozying up to the Iranian regime, to the mullahs, to negotiate over the nuclear issues, as if it's all over and they don't have to think about a country which executes hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, that tortures them in prison. And talking to Dr. Tami Abu Hedra, you see, you are somebody, I always say this, I wish there were many more brave people like you, because it's only... Because he is so brave, he risked his life to tell us the truth about what was really happening over Ashraf and over Camp Liberty. But I have to say, as a human rights lawyer, I have never been so ashamed of my government in all my long life as I am now. And it isn't just the silence and the lies and the pretending they didn't know what was going on and saying, yes, the massacre happened, but refusing to actually admit that they know who the perpetrators was. It was the Malikis, it was the Iranian government. Widows for Peace and Democracy strongly condemns the massacre of 52 Iranian refugees in Iraq on the 1st of September. WPD believes it is imperative that the perpetrators of this massacre are brought to justice and calls for a thorough and independent international investigation into the 1st of September massacre. And the Prime Minister of Iraq is informed of the international community's intolerance for the persecution of Iranian dissidents in Iran, in Iraq. That is the statement, that is the letter that I will write on WPD. And then I will also use my big alliance, which is more than 80 women's organisations across the United Kingdom, including in the devolved, in Wales, in Scotland and Northern Ireland, to support it. So it's a very, very strong message that goes to Nave Pillay, but also goes to our government and to Ban Ki-moon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, everyone. So I'm so grateful to all the honourable members of Parliament from both houses of the British Parliament that for so many years stood with us shoulder to shoulder and fought this very difficult struggle. If I may, regarding the recent terrible, brutal criminal attack against Ashraf, I have to say that this was done out of absolute desperation on the part of the Mullah's regime, the religious dictatorship ruling my country, Iran. So the issue and the problem of Iran is no longer an obstacle or a struggle for Iranian people. It is a major international issue of concern for the whole world community, safety, security, development and progress. Let us once again not make another mistake of appeasing a terrible, brutal religious dictatorship, very much responsible for committing serious crimes against humanity not only against Iranians, but many, many millions of people in the Middle East, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Afghanistan, and elsewhere in the Middle East region and abroad. The time has come for the solution, and the solution is Madam Rajavi's third option. The PMOI, the People's Mujahideen in Ashraf, in Liberty, inside Iran, outside, elsewhere around the world, is symbolizing and has emerged as the antithesis against Islamic fundamentalism, a very terrible phenomenon that had led the Middle East and Iranian people into facing catastrophe. The only way we can challenge it is through a democratic, tolerant, progressive, pluralistic movement that strongly believes in equal rights, freedom, and democracy. So the third option is at our hand. And I think it is time for us not to just quit, but to actually aggravate and to strengthen up all of our efforts to bring the maximum pressure against Nouri Maliki, against the Iraqi government, through the British government, British Foreign Office, British Prime Minister, the EU, the United States government and UN, not to negotiate and not to appease Iranian regime by having a blind eye over the crimes committed by Nouri Maliki. They know, we know, that the 7 hostages are taken and are now at their hands. We need them to be released. We need security and safety to be guaranteed at liberty. And I have no doubt the victory would be ours, and this is the mullahs who are doomed to be overthrown.